Thank you. So I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is the Independent School District number 832, Mahtomedi Public Schools, regular meeting on Thursday, December 10th at 7:03 p.m. Due to the current emergency declarations and guidance about limiting person-to-person contact due to COVID-19 pandemic, this meeting of the Mahtomedi School Board is being conducted in accordance with Minnesota Statute 13D.021, meetings by telephone or other electronic means. Due to the health pandemic, the school board determined that it is not feasible for at least one board member, the superintendent, or the school district's legal counsel to be physically present at the regular meeting location, and it's not feasible for the public to attend this meeting at the regular meeting location. Persons may monitor this meeting from a remote location by watching our live stream. School board members are reminded to mute their microphones when they're not speaking. And then with that, all votes will also be conducted by roll call vote. Each board member should wait until their name is called before voting. This meeting is being recorded. Access to the recording will be made available on the school district's website as soon as reasonably possible. So we'll begin with roll call of attendance. Julie.
Kevin Donovan.
Here.
Julie McGraw here. Judy Schwartz. I feel like we need a big fireworks for Judy.
Here, thank you.
Stacy Stout.
Here.
Lucy Payne.
Here. Okay, thank you.
Oh, and Ismail. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm here.
Sorry. Lucy distracted me. Sorry about that.
We'll start, or now that we started, if we could get an approval for the agenda.
So moved.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm sorry, was that Stacy? Thank you, Stacy. Moved by Kevin, second by Stacy. Any discussion on the agenda? I would like to mention that we have changed the order of our agenda tonight. Usually we do discussion items prior to action items, but we have some presentations with outside presenters tonight. We would like to give them the opportunity to present first, so we are doing action items prior, and that's how the agenda is written. So there is that slight change in the format that you received. Roll call vote for approval of the agenda, please.
Kevin Donovan.
Aye.
Julie McGraw, aye. Judy Schwartz.
Aye.
Stacy Stout.
Aye.
And Lucy Payne.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. Next on the agenda is the approval of the consent agenda. Looking for a motion.
So moved.
Thank you, Julie.
Second.
Thank you. Moved by Julie, second by Judy. Any discussion on consent agenda items? Seeing no discussion, roll call vote, please, Julie.
Kevin Donovan.
Aye.
Julie McGraw, aye. Judy Schwartz.
Aye.
Stacy Stout.
Aye.
And Lucy Payne.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. Next, we have presentations and recognitions. We're starting with a recognition of our own Judy Schwartz as a school board member. Are you starting this or am I?
Well, you could either one. I guess we didn't talk about that ahead of time. I'm happy
all kinds
to.
of things for tonight, including a really nice reception for Judy earlier, but then we forgot this one detail to plan. So
I am happy to start us off, and I will say, so tonight is our last meeting with Judy Schwartz, and Judy has served on the Mahtomedi School Board for 32 years. And we did have a reception, a Zoom reception for Judy prior to this meeting, where we heard over and over again from people who have served with Judy how much all of us appreciate your ability to cut right to the heart of the matter, your directness, your commitment to the district, your support of all of us, and you're calm. You're calm in the face of difficult times. So we're so thankful for all you've done, Judy, for the school board, for the district, and for the students of Mahtomedi. And I do have for you this lovely bell, which I will run over to you later. I keep joking because Judy wanted to sneak out the door and not have formal recognition. She doesn't like to be the center of attention. And she told me I could put the bell in her mailbox and that would be fine with her. So that's the joke I keep telling, because that's how Judy would like it. But we are glad we get to recognize you publicly and thank you for your service. And I know others on here would like to say a few words as well.
Thank you.
So I'll start, and then if other board members have comments, they can let me know. So Judy, I want to thank you for your dedication and your thoughtfulness of all the work that we've done together and all the work you did prior to me coming on the board. But you've had a calm voice, as it's been stated, but you're also instrumental in keeping our conversations focused on the issue at hand, and also very good at knowing when the conversation is starting to loop back around and helping us move towards taking a vote and keeping the meeting moving, which I so appreciate. I appreciate the historical context that you've always shared with us, by also thinking about the potential for the future. You were chair when I first came onto the board and served as vice chair and clerk with you. You were a role model for my being chair, and I appreciate the time you took with me to help me understand the role. I also want to thank you for your ongoing dedication to all students in our district and all the years you spent representing us on the 916 board. So if others have comments for Judy as well, now would be the time. Go ahead, Julie.
It's been a real honor to serve with you for the last 6 years, Judy. And I appreciate your logical approach to decision-making as well. And when I was making notes, I wrote that I appreciated your no-nonsense approach, but everyone has a different take on it. It's the ability to cut to the chase or the getting to the quick of things. Like, everyone's got the stance, like, we're all gonna miss that. Like, it comes out of nowhere, and it always helped us focus. And you really have a knack for that. So we're really going to miss that. And in the future, when I'm sitting at a meeting at 9 o'clock, I'm going to be channeling you, because I'm going to miss you. I'm going to miss you. We all know what that means.
I know, too late.
It's too late. Let's get going. And next spring, when I'm dividing my yard, I'm going to bring you and your husband some Baptisia, because I know you always like the purple, big, tall purple flower at the District Ed Center, and I'm going to bring you some. So.
Oh, thank you. We would love it.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie.
All right. Go ahead, Kevin.
Well, Judy, again, it has been an absolute honor and privilege to learn from you over these 15 years. And when we've had difficult decisions to make, you were able, again, as people have said, able to distill it all down and help us all understand the decision at hand and make that always on the best interests of our students and our community, our Zephyr community. And in education, we have this, we take a complicated thing and make it even more complicated. And you had the unique ability to take it the other way. You'd simplify it for us and help us digest it. It's, saying about eating an elephant one bite at a time. And you would help us bring it back down and make real life decisions for our students. And I'm eternally grateful to have had the 15 years of service and friendship with you. Thank you, Judy.
Thanks, Kevin. I appreciate that.
Go ahead, Stacy.
Judy, I just want to say thank you so much for all your years of service, not only to our community, but as Lucy mentioned, also the 916 community. And as you know, we had the chance to serve together on the 916 Foundation Board. And I really appreciate your understanding of the big picture and what we're all here for, and the service we want to provide to every kid in our district. So I just see how your service has impacted so many lives, and just really want to call that out and appreciate all you've done.
Thank you, Stacy.
So Judy, thank you for your humbleness tonight and letting us recognize you. I know it's not what you wanted at the board table, but I appreciate you letting us have this time with you tonight to thank you for your service.
Thank you very much.
So next presentation and recognition we have is from Community Education. Kate Anderson is with us.
Hello, everyone. And, thank you for having me, and congratulations and thank you, Judy, for all you've done for the Mahtomedi School community here. So I'm going to share my screen, and we will. Oh, I think I did it. Did it work?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to give an update tonight on the community education program. And the key things that we'll be hitting on are our community education programs, what they are, our COVID-19 impact, give some updates on our annual report that was just due November 1st, and then talk about some upcoming programming that's happening. So as you can see, we have 6 different major programs that we oversee in community ed, youth enrichment in our Mahtomedi Adventure Camp, or club, excuse me, our facilities and athletics, communications and marketing, adult and basic education, secondary enrichment, and our adult and senior programming, and early childhood. That's one of the programs sometimes the public has a misunderstanding that that might be under K-21, but it's really under community ed. There's lots of sub-programs underneath those. Another piece that we, in the 1920 and 2021 school year, we have been assisting with the Tier 1 essential care. So back in March, when the school shut down, Barb asked community ed to assist in implementing that. So just going to give a little bit of update on that. So in March through June, and then again from September to November, families or students that had an adult in their home that was considered an essential worker, they were eligible for free care during school hours. It's ran through community education, but it is implemented by district paraprofessionals. So in the spring of 2020, when we were doing distance learning, we had about 109 registered. Those are families that thought they had an interest in it, but we approximately had 20 students per day. In the fall, when, after the summer and things had changed, and then we came back in hybrid. In August, we had 179 students registered. And in the elementary, remember that students went to school 4 days, but they had 1 day of distance learning. So on that 1 day, if a student had an adult in their home that was considered an essential worker, they were eligible to come to school. And so we had approximately 30 students a day, and that was both at Wildwood and OHA. And then when we switched to most recently back to distance learning, at that point in time, as you can see on the bottom there, it was deemed by a mandate, the state mandate, that both adults in a household, if there was dual adults, or if it was a single adult household, that they all needed to be essential care workers to receive that free care. And at that time, we had 129 students that were registered. And right now we're servicing about 110 students per day. And it's going really well. I think Barb's going to give more of an update on that, but it's really been going well. Another aspect that community education is assisting the district with is a new initiative. We're really working on the equity, and this was brought to the school board in July, as you remember, through a petition. It was just after the unrest with George Floyd. We really wanted to continue taking action on our equity vision for the district. So we did initially have a community equity advisory committee that got together in July, and we worked on having some subcommittees broken down in there based on interests of the individuals that were a part of that committee. And some of the things that came out of this equity work so far is we have, we're obviously doing it virtually. We're doing a book study, and I put the titles of some of the books that we have been discussing with community members. And it was nice because after the first October session, several of the individuals that participated spread the word out to some of their colleagues or some neighbors. And so it's growing some momentum, the size of the group. So that's nice. With Patrick Crothers' help, we worked with partnering Wildwood Library to provide some distance learning pods, some computer areas for students who were having needed some assisted or additional technology access. Maybe there was too many people in their household, or they had a bad connection, or they wanted a quiet space. So we created that partnership. We also had a couple of parents from this equity work that asked to participate in the curriculum committee that Lynn is leading. And then we are continuing our work in our Many Faces Consortium. So now I want to go over some of the impact that COVID-19's had on community ed. And as many of you know, community ed is a revenue generating program. We do receive some funding, but a lot of it is based on our participant fees. Community ed is a mostly in-person participation, but it has been extremely limited in the last 9 months. We are, for some families, the main extracurricular activity program for students and for adults, especially our seniors in our community. And the demographics that we serve in community ed are birth through senior citizens. I wanted to highlight some of the challenges and some of the accomplishments that we've been able to do with this impact of COVID-19. We have had a loss of our revenue due to the limited programming, and I'm sure many parents can attest to that. We've really struggled with trying to provide some type of enrichment activity for students outside of their school day, which comes into play with their social and emotional. I know that's been a big concern for families, and our school board has really discussed that in some of these model changes. So that's been a challenge for us too. One of the biggest challenge, obviously, is that we've had to do some layoffs right in the beginning. In March, Barb and Jamie, our MAC coordinator, had to do some layoffs because we were going to have the paraprofessionals running the Tier 1 care. And then based on the latest executive order and the pause that Governor Walz has, we've had to do some layoffs the very beginning of December, also in our athletics and facilities, as well as some of our office staff. So it's been pretty difficult this year. But some of the accomplishments that we've had is we've really been successful with that Tier 1 care for our families, looking at alternative programs, how we can do things virtually or do things outside in a social distancing way. We did some senior drive-bys and have done some handwritten messages because that's a group that is really struggling and it's really difficult. But we just recently did Thinking of You bags again after Thanksgiving with homemade masks again, and some special notes. We did learn, I guess, how to do our brochure in a digital way, and we did that in the fall, and that was pretty successful, and we're going to be doing that again shortly, again for our winter spring. We looked at doing virtual lessons and meetings. We started providing more take-home kits for families, and we're going to be amping that up here for the winter and spring again. We partnered with Alice and a group of stakeholders in our community to do community connection events. We had a successful one in October, and we are looking at doing another event in January. And then, of course, the equity programming has been really successful, and we're looking for more ways to provide that. Here are some of those new offerings that we developed. Look at that cute face on the right of that little boy that's taking his virtual guitar lessons. He's very excited about that. So again, those were just some of the new offerings that we looked into. Once we were able to lift some of the restrictions for inside our buildings, the beginning of July, we were able to bring things back, but we also had coaches that were really willing to do things outdoors. So that was great. We looked at some social and emotional things at the middle school, and again, some online courses that families had expressed interest in. The other thing I wanted to highlight is our Mahtomedi Adventure Club. So typically our school age care program is one of our largest revenue generating programs. And our enrollment numbers typically are around a little over 200 during the school year, and that does take into effect our children that are occasional. And then our summers usually run about 125 to 140, it just depends. So as you look at the numbers here, you can really see that we've taken a huge hit on the number of families and students. We had 90 over the summer. It went down to 69 in the fall. And right now we are only servicing 30 students for MAC. And that's a big hit for us. So that lower enrollment does mean less revenue for us. And some of the reason that we weren't able to service as many students is that we had to have that student to teacher ratio is much lower. The protocols that were created for COVID-19 did mean more staffing. The other thing that I wanted to highlight was Jamie did a great job this summer. We had to cancel obviously all of our field trips, but we worked really hard at doing on-site special things like some bike trips. We took small groups to the library. They did do one trip to Cup and Cone. So, but we had to really work at providing different things for the kids. And then we did specific club classes. Again, the students were in their pods and they were not able to do any intermixing between those pods. So they stayed with those same 14 students all day long. And they did a great job. We had a very successful summer that way for the kids, the safety wise. Here's some of our summer athletics programs. Our numbers, I highlighted the tennis number is the only sport that we saw an increase in participants, and we believe it's because all of it was outside and we could start it right away in June. But most of our numbers, it looks like we took about, I think it was a 40%, no, that wasn't here, that we did take a hit in our programming. All the coaches and the associations did have to submit a COVID-19 health and safety plan. That went to Pam Klinkhammer. She reviewed that. And number 3 shows some of the different protocols that we had to follow. We just wanted to showcase some of how some of the programs, dog obedience, tennis, sports, and it looks to me like most of them have a pretty happy face on. So that makes us feel good that they were enjoying themselves. Early childhood is another large revenue generating program for us. And in the spring, all of our classes went to distance learning. Teachers did that from home with students. We offered preschool and early childhood family ed free. They did not pay a tuition during that time. All of the early childhood staff did stay on, and we're working in that distance learning model. Our paras were supporting our teachers and assisting, connecting with the kids at home. But because of that free tuition during that time, early childhood carries a fund balance usually, which is a protected account in the community education budget. And we essentially drained that account almost. And they started this fiscal school year with about $5,000. So we're trying to slowly work our way back up for that. In the fall, we began in hybrid model. This is where we had our 40% overall. We have about a 40% lower enrollment. We did have to decrease the number of sections that we were offering for preschool and early childhood. But we did look to create some additional online programming for parents. So parent education, which is in the elementary and the middle school. And we also have a special babies and parenting online class also that's going good. As I talked about, November 1st every year, we need to submit an annual report to the Department of Education where we have to report on the numbers. So we talk about the number of community members that we serve. This past school year, we served 6,000, a little over 6,000. And if you see there, last year, we were about almost, not quite, but almost doubled. So we definitely took a hit with a number of people that participated, and that's probably most likely because we were shut down. And then even when we came back in June, it was real. We just didn't have as many MAC students or sport activities. We did work with 45 groups for facility use, and we were down about 10 users. But we are excited that we'll continue to grow that. We have some new programming coming out. So, and the other thing that we report on is the hours that our facilities are in use. And that was a little over 5,500. So again, one of the things we need to report on this last year in the annual report, they asked us what were some of our biggest challenges. And over and over, community eds were telling MDE, it was very difficult for programs to run tier 1 for free with limited funding assistance. So most of the funding went to the K-12 programs, not to community ed. So we are doing some upcoming program. We have our early childhood school year 21-22. So in community ed, we're already thinking about next fall. And that brochure is going to be digital this year, and it will become available January 1st. Families will have the opportunity to look at that and see what preschool and early childhood classes that we're offering. And then next week, we will be going live with our winter and spring digital brochure. We will be creating a postcard that we'll be mailing out to all families in the district, telling them where to look online, and that if they don't have the ability or don't have the resources to look online, to just give us a phone call and we'll print a copy and mail it out to them. But some of the exciting new offerings that we have, we're doing some DIY virtual youth and adult classes. Our early childhood families will have access to a Happy Feet mobile soccer program. We've got rocketry, animation and interactive games for our older elementary and our middle school. Again, some social and emotional love your body, food is fuel. We have some new adult photography classes coming up. We're going to try a virtual funny hat bingo family event. And one of the nice things that we're working on is we're going to do a grab and go monthly kit. You can either pick it for youths or there is a family fun. And so you sign up for that, and every month you'll get a box that includes 4 different activities based on STEM, arts, social and emotional, and I think it was enrichment. And then each month you'll get a new one, some upcoming things. We're going to do winter fun. We're going to do her story, talking about women in history. We're going to do some a month about Wakanda and learning about that, and then the human body. So that's an exciting new thing for some families. And thank you for allowing me some time to talk about community ed and the impacts and the challenges, successes, and what's coming up next. Do you have any questions?
Kate, if you'll unshare your screen, we'll be able to see the board again for questions.
Sure. Yep.
And Kevin can start us off.
Thank you for that great presentation. I have such a warm heart for community ed as one of the spokes of the wheel for Mahtomedi schools. The cup and cone deal, if you ever need chaperones when that happens, you know where to reach me. But my serious comment is on the funding side. Is there any movement, any thought that the legislature may grant some relief to community ed since we are challenged at this time?
I think there's conversations that are happening about that. And I think they are looking at, I think there's some CARES dollars that we could have some access to possibly coming up. We've also, our staff have been great about trying to get some grants. We did get a grant for some childcare. Jamie secured that. That was probably maybe it was $8,000 or $9,000, 3 payments of that. Stephanie just received a grant from the Greater White Bear Lake Foundation for some scholarships for students. And we are looking at possibly trying to submit some grants for MAIF also. But we keep talking about it, Kevin, but nothing has been solidified for that. And I know that many community eds in the metro area have drained their fund balances. But we have been very lucky here. I think being that we're a smaller school district, and Barb and Jeff have been super supportive of community ed, and we've really worked together to try to figure out how to best financially keep community ed in a good spot.
We're blessed to have some really great legislators.
Yes.
And recently Roger Chamberlain, education, finance. And so these stories maybe are something that we can share with them as we go forward into the new session. So,
thank you, Kevin.
thank you.
Go ahead, Stacy.
I just want to commend you on all the work you've done. I know you came on board right as COVID hit, and we've always had really strong programming through community ed. And I think you've done a great job to be creative, to really navigate through the months we've had. I know there was one class that was an online gaming class that was really popular, and just so many others that I know that you had to really think outside the box. So I just wanted to say thank you for the work you've done.
I appreciate that, Stacy. The coordinators here have been so wonderful, as you know, with my arrival here. It's like a well-oiled machine, but they really, I appreciate that, because we have had some challenging times and we're really looking at trying to step outside the box. So thank you.
Kate, I want to add my thanks as well. I appreciate your presentation. I can see a lot of connections to our strategic plan, and I think that's commendable during the time of a pandemic when you're trying to keep offices running and services flowing for community members, and to also have that strategic plan at front of mind is very noble. And I thank you for that work. I also appreciate the way you're thinking differently and look forward to how you continue to do that even when the pandemic is over, and how we take what we've learned from this time forward to make our programs even better. So thank you for all your work there and forward thinking that we need to keep doing. So
Thanks. I have a great team.
you sure do. Any other comments from board members on this? Go ahead, Julie.
I wanted to really echo what everyone else has said, like what a hard time to start. Just a hard year, and all the things you've come up with. It's really just great to see how you're rolling with it, because that's all we can do. So thank you, because it doesn't mean the work's gone away. So thank you for all you do.
Thanks, Julie.
Any other comments? All right. Thank you so much, Kate, for coming tonight. It was good to get the update.
Thank you.
Next on our agenda, we have a report from our student representative, Ismail Ball. Go ahead.
So my student report for this month of December, Wildwood, there weren't many events or any at all. In OH Anderson on the 4th, they had a Friday Spirit Day where they brought their stuffed animals. And on the 11th, they're planning on having a formal / fancy day for their distance learning. And on the 18th, they're also having a superhero day for their distance learning. There wasn't anything in the middle school, but in the high school, the STEM club has a virtual documentary and screening session from the 10th of December to the 13th. I understand that this is a short report, but we're in distance learning and there really isn't anything happening right now. I think I speak for all students when I say thank you to all of the Mahtomedi School District staff that have worked to make this distance learning possible. I would like to thank all the teachers from the elementaries all the way to the high school and in between. It's very hard to teach through a computer screen and also to keep that learning atmosphere and environment around. All of you have not been given enough praise for your hard work and dedication throughout the school year, and your work has not gone unnoticed. And I'd like to thank all this faculty and staff, and especially the janitorial staff who have kept our buildings clean and safe for all of us. We don't appreciate you enough, especially in the year of 2020. You come to work every day, roll up your sleeves, and keep all the staff at this building safe. Thank you for everything you've done. And I'd also like to thank the parents of the community. I know that it's really hard having all your kids at home. Trust me, I even give my parents a headache at times. But thank you for all you do and keeping us all sane at home. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate all the kind comments you've given to staff, and agree that we have not given enough credit to our staff for the hard work that they're doing on behalf of our students. So any questions for Ismail? All right. Thank you so much. Next, we have our action items. Again, this is a change. We're doing action items before discussion items. So the first action item we have is approval of donations and grants totaling $4,817.22.
Move approval.
Thank you, Judy.
Second.
Moved by Judy, seconded by Kevin to approve these donations and grants. Any discussion? I would like to thank all the donors. The donors and the grants are greatly appreciated. These funds will be used to further the mission of the school district and are used towards the wishes of the donors. Many of our donations tonight come from the elementary PTO, and these funds are raised by many members in our community. So our appreciation goes to the PTO and to the many people who donate to that cause. So we have a motion and a second on the floor. If we can have a roll call vote, please, Julie.
Kevin Donovan.
Aye.
Julie McGraw, aye. Judy Schwartz.
Aye.
Stacy Stout.
Aye.
Lucy Kane.
Aye, motion carries. Thank you. Next for action items, we have the Truth in Taxation presentation from Jeff Priest.
I think we have the audit next.
Yeah, I think it's the audit.
Sorry, I'm glad you're paying better attention than I am. So let's go to the audit first. And that's still Jeff Priest. So here you go.
Yeah, I'll start. We have Mr. Eichten with us tonight. He's no stranger, I think, to this board. Has been here in front of you many times. I'll just say that, I think I started giving the board preliminary audit results probably back in August. And I don't think that too many things have changed as we get to the final presentation. But I think what we learned this year, doing an audit virtually took a little bit longer than I thought that it would. So we're hoping to be done in October or November. So maybe next year we can get this thing done in August, right, Jim?
That's right.
So, and I don't think so I'll mention, I think I mentioned before that we've got a clean audit opinion. It's the highest and best opinion that we can receive. And then I haven't mentioned that we'll be submitting the CAFR, the final audit report, to the ASBO group for the Certificate of Excellence in Financial Reporting. And I would imagine we'll receive that award. And if we do, it'll be the third year in a row that the district has received that. So I'll get out of Jim's way here. I'll just step out and say it was I think a really good audit report, but we'll let Jim present the findings. Jim.
Well, thanks, Jeff, for the introduction. Again, my name is Jim Eichten with MMKR CPAs. I'm the auditor, for the district. I would support everything that Jeff has said so far. I'll get into some of the specifics around the results of the audit here in a little bit. But overall, the results are very good. You'll see that as I go through, my presentation this evening. I do have a PowerPoint that I'm going to go through, so I'll share that right there, and I'll get started with the presentation. So it is a requirement in the state law that the district prepare an annual financial report and have that financial report audited by an independent certified public accountant. And that's really my role with the district, is to provide opinions on the district's financial statements. That for those particular financial statements, as Jeff mentioned, are above and beyond the normal financial statements a district is required to prepare, as the district has chosen to complete a comprehensive annual financial report. And that particular financial report is subject to achievement of the Association of School Business Officials. It's about a 122-page document, which has a lot of great information, a lot of historical information as well about the district. And it will be submitted for achievement in excellence in financial reporting, and we fully expect that the district will receive that recommendation. So as part of the audit, we do also required to issue opinions in a number of other areas, including the compliance with various internal controls as they relate to these financial statements. We audit your compliance with laws and regulations, again, as they relate to financial statements. We also audit your compliance with the federal awards that you receive. It's called the single audit of federal awards. As you might anticipate, this past year and rolling forward, some of the challenges we have are in these particular areas as school districts receive a lot of additional federal aids as part of the pandemic. This year's single audit won't be affected by that, but certainly next year's will. And then we also issue your compliance with Minnesota specific laws and regulations. We audit your compliance with a list of laws that's provided by the Office of the State Auditor in the state of Minnesota. We don't audit every law, just those laws that relate to the list that they provide to us. So getting into the audit results, my audit results are provided in two documents. One's called the Special Purpose Audit Reports, and then we also issue what's called the Management Report. And in that Management Report, we go through the audit results in detail. And I'll go through some of those right now. Certainly from the audit results perspective, Jeff did mention this. Traditionally, as far as, my audit presentations, they've kind of gone back and forth between presenting in November and presenting in December, depending on the nature of the district audit. And this is pretty normal. I would guess, though, in the pandemic and doing these audits virtually, as well as, really semi-virtually in a lot of cases, most districts are quite a bit behind in terms of processing the audits, both internally, but also externally in terms of working remotely with their auditors. I'd say your report is probably in the top 20% in terms of timing at our office. We audit over 60 local government entities, and you're one of the first to actually issue the report. So Jeff's goal certainly of moving this audit and completing it sooner will certainly be noteworthy for us as we move forward, and hopefully it won't be in the midst of a pandemic. So going back to the audit results, I did mention my opinion on the district's audit. We did issue what's called an unmodified opinion on the basic financial statements. It wasn't a clean opinion. It was the opinion you were looking for going into this particular audit, and certainly it is a positive note. As it relates to the district's internal controls and compliance reports I mentioned, there are two reportable items that I wanted to bring to the board's attention. One of those items relate to the limited segregation of duties. So in any audit of an organization, the first thing we look at in developing our audit standards is development of risks. And in that risk assessment process, we look at and ask a lot of questions, specifically around internal controls in the organizational structure of the entity, and in those types of controls you have over financial transactions. And this particular reportable item relates to the fact that the district is operating with limited segregation of duties, which is very typical of an organization your size. The district audit is completed under that parameters, really isn't a concern to us, or really even a recommendation that you might change this particular area. It's just something that the district and both administration and the board needs to be aware of, that we are operating under these segregation of duties control systems. What's most important is that the district have compensating controls, other controls in place, so that you have appropriate controls in place given the limited segregation of duties. The second item that you'll note there in the PowerPoint is the bank reconciliation process. During our development of the risk assessment process, one of the questions we asked related to the bank reconciliation process, as well as we were asking a lot about what the controls were pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. What we found in these audits this year, that given the pandemic and given that many organizations started to work remotely, there were a lot of changes in internal control processes, and we were concerned as auditors, that organizations were weakening controls as a result of the change in pandemic. And so what ended up coming about as part of this particular comment is that we noted as part of the process that during the year that the bank reconciliation process was delayed or was not being completed timely during the year, this particular item was actually recognized by staff. It really was not recognized by us as auditors. It was recognized by your own staff, probably in May, I believe is the date. And at that time, the staff and the particular Jeff put in some new controls and developed some new internal control systems and developed some new processes, so that the delays in the bank reconciliation process were improved. And I believe the board actually saw some of those particular items in some of the reports you're receiving. Some of the modifications and reports actually showed some of those bank reconciliation processes. So why is this being brought up in the audit right now? Really, it really is being reported to you because you need to be aware of that. My audit, we added some control processes. We tested some of these new systems. We developed some of our testing around the fact that this bank reconciliation process had changed, and there were some challenges throughout the year as it related to it. Is there a recommendation to change anything? No, actually there's not. Frankly, the changes have already been made, and we fully believe that those processes are adequate and really developed appropriately. Moving on, I did mention the single audit of federal awards. We did audit this year, and we did not have any findings in that space. And then we also audit the laws, Minnesota laws and regulations. It did not have any findings in that area as well. So all in all, very positive audit results from the compliance perspective. I also want to follow up on prior year findings. It is important, and I always say this at board meetings, audits are a learning experience. It's intended to be in a way to improve the overall organization. And the board should come at it from that perspective, the perspective of how can we learn from this process. And one of the comments that I made last year related to a finding on performance bonds. And the importance of that particular finding was, what was the corrective action? How are we going to correct it so that it doesn't occur in the future? So we, at this year's audit, and looked into that particular finding, we probably added testing to verify that there wasn't a finding again this year. And certainly, as you can see in the PowerPoint, that wasn't a finding this year. And certainly the administration and the board should be commended, because that's really probably the most important part of any audit, is that the prior year findings were eliminated. So that's really the end of my comments regarding the findings in the particular areas there. I did want to highlight, go back to a little bit that this particular audit was done, in the midst of a pandemic. I think we as a board, we as an auditors want to stress the importance of the internal controls. It is a very big challenge that the district is going through when it comes to continuing to process data in the midst of a pandemic and keeping up, with the day-to-day aspects of the organization. And the development of the controls were very important to us, and we talked to the superintendent and the district office about that, and making sure that the controls were stable, even though you're having to process things differently. So I'm going to go into the next part of the audit, which really is the financial results. Jeff has touched on these, as he mentioned, quite a bit, going all the way back to August. So I'll just touch on some of the highlights that I come up with as part of my report. In my report, which is the management report, this particular presentation is in the report. It really references governmental revenues per student served. And you can see in this particular presentation that the district receives about $15,219 per student annually. The general fund has about $12,800 per student. You can see in that particular graph, the district's revenue is slightly below statewide averages. The statewide average is about $13,600 per student. This particular year, the district received about, had some increases in some various areas, including property taxes in terms of the levy there, and some additional aids on the formula that you receive that generated additional revenues. One of the areas you can point out there that actually supports what was talked about earlier in this meeting, which is in the community service fund. You can see the dollars revenues per student dropped dramatically on that graph from $697 per student down to $607. And I'll get to some more data on the community service fund in a little bit. We also show information on expenditures per student. The district spends about $12,200 per student in the general fund. That is below the statewide averages per student, but really correlates back to the revenues. The district receives less revenue per student, and you would anticipate that expenditures would be less per student as a result. Here, one of the highlights for me is when I look at this particular audit, the limited increase in expenditures. Overall, the district's expenditures per student increased slightly, really due to some operating effectivenesses that were happening in the district. Really seeing some good information on that particular area. One of the other items that I would point out there as well is in the community service fund. You can see again the downturn in overall expenditures within that particular program area. So the district's financial results for the year, you can see here that this is a 10-year graphical presentation of the district's financial position. The fund balance at the end of the year was roughly 4.6 million from an unrestricted perspective, certainly showing improvements after a couple of years of downturn in 2018 and 2019. You can see the improvement. I'm going to go to the next graph because I think this actually portrays it a little bit better. The total fund balance went from $3.7 million at the end of 2019 to a total of $5 million. These particular fund balances are broken down into categories, both the unrestricted categories, but also the unassigned categories that the district uses. The district does actually have a fund balance policy, really, which guides the year-end fund balance, which is your equity position at the end of the year. That particular fund balance policy really limits, has the fund balance at a minimum of 8%. And as you can see at the end of 2020, with some of the improvements made in fund balance, this particular year, you're at 8.5%, which is just slightly above the minimum that you had. I want to commend the board and the administration for these increases. I know that last year when I made these presentations, and maybe even the year before, having these fund balances around 4% was not the preferred place for the district. And certainly with this year's results, you can see that your fund balance is back to the minimums that you would anticipate. I also want to point out these particular fund balance results are very consistent with what we're experiencing all over the metropolitan area in fund balances. The pandemic, with its closures of the facilities and the programming back from March basically till the end of June, many districts experienced lower than anticipated or budgeted expenditures, which is actually increasing fund balances. I do say this mainly because it's a cautionary tale. It might look good for 1 year, but we are experiencing challenges all over the educational community when it comes to financial results. It is a very challenging environment right now in education, and these improvements in a fund balance, albeit positive, should be come with a cautionary warning. And I believe that certainly your district is aware of that and the administration is aware of it, but certainly it's important to hear from me as well. My audit also provides some information on revenues and expenditures. Part of the reason I show these particular items is that I want to focus in on the budgetary presentations. It is important that the audit come with an analysis of budget, because many of the information you're getting to make decisions is on this particular budget. And if the audit doesn't hold true to that budget, it's something that can challenge the board in some of its decision making. This particular revenue graph does show some budget to actual as well as prior year data. The revenues for the year were roughly $280,000 over budget, which is very close to projections, given that this organization, general fund, is a $42 million operation and revenues came within 284,000 is certainly a very good revenue projection, and leads me to say certainly those particular results can be relied upon to make informed decisions. The expenditures results were less than budgeted amounts by about 1.1 million. These particular results actually are very consistent with what we're experiencing all over the metropolitan area, with the closure of the schools and some of the data points in those areas. Many of the expenditures were slowed down dramatically during that time, and we're seeing all over the metro those particular areas. That being said, we're able to identify what those areas are and easily identify, not we, but the district administration. So again, the budget is very strong. tool for the district and can again be relied upon to make decisions. The last item I wanted to point out is the financial results in the two other operating funds that are important to the district, including the Food Service Fund and the Community Service Fund. The Food Service Fund, as you might anticipate, did have a decline in fund balance, roughly decreased about $60,000. It did end the year with a fund balance of about $240,000, which is about 20% of operations. And certainly that 20% of operations is something that can be relied upon, to moving forward. You can also see the Community Service Fund that was addressed earlier by the previous presentation showed a fund balance decrease of about $87,000. Revenues in that fund were about $275,000 less than what was budgeted. Given that it's about a $2 million program, that's a pretty big number to absorb in such a small program. And certainly these results, albeit lower than what was projected in terms of results, are much better than some other organizations and some other districts are experiencing in their community service funds. We've seen some very challenging districts are experiencing very challenging areas in this particular fund going forward. So in summary, I was able to issue a clean opinion on the district's financial report. I talked about the two reportable items that I wanted to provide information to the board on, the Certificate of Excellence in Financial Reporting that I addressed as well, and certainly the improving general fund financial position is probably the highlight of my presentation. So with that, I'll turn it over to the board for questions for me.
Questions for Jim or Jeff? Go ahead, Kevin.
Well, again, in these very uncertain times, I just very commendable to Jeff and the team. And school finance is one of the most complicated things we do in the state of Minnesota. And school finance during times of COVID, this is just really gratifying to see. This the separation of duties is a finding that we've had, I think, every year for as long as I've been on the board, and essentially it speaks to the fact that we could have another person or two on staff to get rid of that, but then there'd be an associated cost. So I think it's commendable that Jeff has done the various things to make sure that we have compliance in that area, and has moved quickly to address the other item that we saw tonight. So just my hat's off to Jeff and the team.
Thank you.
I move approval of the audit.
Thank you, Judy. We have a motion on the floor.
Second.
Thank you, Kevin. We have a motion from Judy and a second from Kevin to approve the audit as presented. Any discussion? Any discussion? Go ahead, Julie.
I just want to echo what Kevin said and just really thank Jeff for being nimble and responding to concerns by staff, and just express how happy we all are that our fund balance is up in a good spot. Thank you for your work.
Yeah, and I think Kevin said it too, but it's a team here, so it's not. We have a good team, really good team here. So
thank everybody.
Yep.
All right, roll call vote, please, Julie.
Kevin Donovan.
Aye.
Julie McGraw, aye. Judy Schwartz.
Aye.
Stacy Stout.
Aye.
Lucy Payne.
Aye, motion carries. Thank you. So now we get the truth and taxation. Jim, thank you so much for coming tonight and waiting with us to give your presentation. We appreciate your work.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Okay, on to the truth and taxation piece. Go ahead, Jeff.
All right, if I can figure out how to share my screen here. Here we go. Do we have it? There we go.
Yeah.
So the truth and taxation hearing is just another process step on our way to approving the final levy. We have to, be seeing the whole thing there? Oh,
Yes, we
okay.
see the whole thing.
Okay, I'm not. So back in, so part of the levy certification calendar, we had to approve the proposed levy back in September, get that information to the home county auditor by September 30. Prior to that, we're entering a lot of information into the MDE levy system. So it's probably about a 5-month process to get this levy finalized. So now we're at the point of the taxation hearing, and then subsequent to that, we'll ask the board to approve the levy, the pay 21 levy. And I just maybe need to remind people, so when you're approving the levy for pay 21, that will provide funds for the 21-22 school year. So we're a little bit different than cities and counties where they start their fiscal year. It's on a calendar year basis. Ours is 6 months later, starting July 1. So again, we're approving funds for the 21-22 school year. So school district property taxes are comprised of voter approved levies, things like operating referendum, capital projects, also known as a technology levy, building improvement building improvement, construction bonded debt, which where we levy for in our debt service fund. And then we have several different types of discretionary levies. And these are typically levies where there's an authorized dollar amount per student. The dollar amount set by the legislature times pupil units gives us that authority for a certain levy category. And then we go on and work through an equalized formula to determine how much of the levy is state aid and how much will come from local taxes. In this district, it's property taxes, pretty significant part of our total revenue. So when I'm talking about looking at our governmental funds, the revenue from property taxes is providing 28% of total revenue. So just a little bit less than half of our big funding source, which is state aid. So 28%. We roll that over, take a look at our current revised budget. So this might be the first time where when you look at that beginning fund balance, you're seeing the actual audited numbers. Maybe I've been putting them in there, but they weren't final until we received the final audit. So total projected revenue in our revised budget is 52.3 million. And remember that about 28% or 14.8 million of that total revenue is coming from property taxes. And put on there because I think you guys like to hear what that unassigned fund balance looks like. So we have the beginning fund balance for the current year now, 8.5%, and then we roll to 8 point. And again, I can't see that part of the screen, but I think we go to 8.7 right at the end of this current year. So if we take a 2-year look at our levy, so levy comparison from pay 20, which is what we're operating under right now. So the pay 20, the levy you set last December is providing funds for the current year, was at 14.8 million. And the proposed levy that we're going to ask you to approve tonight goes to 15.1. Biggest increase, as you can see, broken down by our 4 governmental funds where we actually levy, is in the general fund. I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to spend a little time talking about that increase. So it's $318,000. About I think it's about 2.15% increase in the levy. So I want to talk about how we get to where that I guess how that increase is generated, where it comes from. So this is really a summary of what am I got here? I think about 17 different lines of different levy authority categories. This actually comes from it's about a 40+ page of, it's a levy certification form from MDE, full of calculations and formulas, and it's just really fun to work with. So you're just kind of seeing a summary of that, but I want you to take a look at, because I want to try to explain what happens with how we get these increases sometimes. I just kind of highlighted that local optional. So this on this screen, on this page, we're showing the pay 20 final at 2.5 million. The pay 21 goes to 2.6. So that's an increase in the levy of 58,000. I'm gonna tell you that we're really not receiving any additional funds, and I want to show you how that works with levies. So this kind of gets into the way we kind of calculate. It, in most cases, doesn't get into the equalizing part, but I could spend the next hour and a half here going through each one of those, but I won't do that to you. So, but we will do that with the with line 4, which is the local optional. So the point there is we receive per student local optional $724 per adjusted pupil unit. We receive that same amount in pay 20. We'll receive that same amount in pay 21. And then for levy aid purposes, and I don't need to get into that, there's a part that's called tier 1 and a part that's called tier 2. So the first 300 of that 724 works its way through tier 1. And that's where we have an equalized formula that breaks down the amount that generates by state aid and levy. All of the tier 2, the 424 is 100% on the levy side of things. So these formulas, when I keep talking about this equalized formula that breaks down all these different levies, breaks them down and puts so much in state aid, so much in local levy, actually come from using values that are 2 years old. So for the pay 20, the formulas for calculating that equalization formula looked at and the local optional uses the referendum market value. Some of our other levies, let's say LTFM, capital outlay, they use the tax capacity. So in this case, we're looking at local optional uses the valuation. So for pay 20, we used values from 2018. For pay 21, we use 2019 values. So it's about I think about a 9% increase in referendum market value. So how that plays out on local optional, and I show the 2 years here. So let's assume, and this won't tie exactly back to that summary page because I left out some of the adjustments that flow through as enrollment is updated and so on. If you're a district, and we were close to this, if you're a district that you have that local optional referendum, that local optional dollar amount, the first 300 in tier 1 and times your pupil units, if your pupil units are the same, it's going to generate same dollar amount. So just over $1,090,000 pay 21, $1,090,000 in pay 20. Now you have to apply those referendum market values. And so in pay 20, we had the 2.265 million versus the 9% increase, 2.4 for pay 21. So that calculates to a levy ratio, as you can see there, 0.93 in 20, 0.99 in pay 21. And then you calculate that levy share. So it's that levy ratio times the total. So for pay 20, we had $1,022,000. For pay 21, goes to $1,083,000. So the levy share has increased 61,000. State aid has decreased by that same amount. We have that $61,000 increase on our levy. So if you think about, go back to that $300,000 increase in Fund 1, the same thing is happening. That same kind of calculation is happening with our referendum, the operating capital, LTFM, all those things where the funding per pupil unit has basically stayed the same. But these changes in property, either tax capacity or market value, just put more of the burden on the local property taxes and reduces the state aid. So with that, I'm using, I think I assumed an increase of 4.31. This is out on the Washington County website. I think the general increase in property values within the district, 4.31. So then I just lay out here using the rates that were in place last year versus what's calculated this year with that increase in the levy, and you can see the increases then for a, what did I use here? I think I used got $250,000 value home and a $500,000. And then it can just calculates through on the market value, tax capacity, what the increases are. So I just wanted to make that point. It's kind of hard sometimes to put this on one or two screens that, hey, here's all the calculations, but here's what happens. It's pretty much based on that, how that market value changes. And I can sit here and, whoops, I don't want to go that far. And say, yep, our general fund is increasing by over 300,000, but for the most part, there's probably not any new revenue for the district. It's going to be a loss, so increase on the levy side, and a decrease then in state aid. Questions on the levy, how we calculate? Yeah.
Go ahead, Kevin.
It's hard to see with the presentation up. So thank you for the clarity on a very complicated financial piece. I did notice that it seems as if the federal piece on the pie chart that you showed was higher than I remember it in past years at 4%.
Yeah, good point. And I'll probably get in, this is the levy presentation. So I was just kind of doing the comparison between state aid and local levy, but, and I'll talk about that when I get into the revised budget presentation a little bit later. Federal is up because we have about, it's about $900,000 more. It's COVID related relief funds that we recognize for this year and we're utilizing. Most likely won't be there in the following year, but good point. I should have mentioned that here because that aid is different than what you've seen, but I will get into that when I do that.
And so just as a point of clarity for anybody watching, Mahtomedi Schools receives a lot less federal aid than district, maybe just to our south or St. Paul or whatever, in that we don't have a lot of title money coming in. I mean, so there's a difference between what school districts receive on a federal level based on title. And I think that's sometimes a bit confusing. That why don't we get as much as another district?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, our title dollars are significantly lower than probably neighboring districts. So as part of this presentation, we need to allow for if there's any public comments, questions.
So if there are members of the public who would like to speak, there is a way to raise your hand, I believe, and we will recognize you and bring you into the meeting if you'd like to speak to this presentation. So we do have one member of the public coming over. Oh, we've got 3 now, I think. So they'll be brought in one at a time, and they're given 3 minutes to speak, which I will time. Okay, so we will begin with Chris Burke. So Chris, if you'd like to turn your camera on, you may. And then once you start speaking, it's not required though. Once you start speaking, I'll time you for 3 minutes.
Great, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My primary question to the board is this. I would like to know what the board is doing to get kids back into the building.
So excuse me, this isn't public comment. This is truth and taxation. And so the comments now are about the truth and taxation piece. The public comments are coming electronically. And so those are sent through the website. So if you want to speak to the presentation, this is the time for that.
Okay. So I'm being taxed and I'm not being heard. So this is my 3 minutes to be heard. It's been communicated that the case count is our primary statistic that is being used to drive decisions.
So I'm sorry, Chris, you need to speak to the presentation. This is your time to be heard on this presentation.
I am. You haven't given me a chance to speak to this any other moment. I've taken my 3 minutes, so please let me finish.
All right, thank you.
It has been presented in such a way to say that the case count is the only metric that matters. This kind of thinking assumes and perpetuates the idea that COVID-19 is extremely dangerous without evaluating or at least reevaluating the truth of this assumption. We've learned a lot about this virus since March. I have very real concerns about basing such important life-changing decisions using a single metric such as cases. For example, no one would buy a car based solely on price. A person would consider several factors such as color, size, and performance. Regarding COVID, there are several factors that we should include when making such decisions. The case rates themselves are not 100% reliable. Not all testing centers follow the same protocols. We use multiple testing centers in Minnesota. Dr. Fauci has stated that for the PCR test, cycles thresholds of 35 cycles or more have a higher chance of false positives. Many labs use at least that many. PCR tests do not publish how many cycles they use when they release positive test results. Molecular tests do not distinguish between a dead virus and an active virus. Both could test positive. Only one of those persons is actually carrying a virus that's dangerous. The CDC is not tracking the flu this year. We have no flu data at all. This also could skew COVID case rates. The severity of the virus has changed since March. The majority of cases now resolve without issues. Many cases are so mild the person doesn't even know they have the disease until they get tested. No child in Minnesota, K through 12, has died from COVID-19. In Minnesota, most COVID deaths occur in long-term care facilities. And I've got a few statistics from the CDC.
You have 30 seconds.
Okay, I'll go fast, thank you. The CDC director, Robert Redfield, said he supports sending kids back to the classroom. Keeping kids in the classroom could be worse than sending them back in. CDC's best estimates of current COVID survival rate is 99.98 for those under 50. There's simply no justification for the drastic measures we currently have in place. Most of us on this call have a 99.9% chance of surviving this virus. It's time to reject the irrational narrative of fear. It's time to be courageous and lead. It's time to get our kids back to school. My question for the board is, what are you doing to get the kids back into the building? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry you weren't able to connect that to the taxation presentation. If you want to send us additional information in email, that would be appreciated. So we have another community member, I believe her name is Jess, coming over. Unfortunately, if you raised your hand earlier, it might have come down. So I think if you still want to speak, okay, here comes Jess. If you still want to speak and you're in the public, if you'll raise your hand again, we will pull you over next. Jess, when you're ready, if you'd like to turn your camera on as well and speak to the truth and taxation presentation, the levy presentation, that'd be great. Thank you.
I just wanted to say that I thought that this was an open forum time to, so can you hear? So I'll use the other methods, but I do just would want to say that usually when you are a taxpayer and you're contributing funds through taxation. I'm wondering, what are the means when you don't think that those funds are being used in a productive way, or the most productive way? And how I, tie this to education would just be that there are lots of schools, private schools, that are open and functioning right now. And unfortunately, our school continues to desire to go down a pathway where the kids' education is not being put first and foremost. And so I would say to the board, the school board, if you're unwilling to listen to the community with regards to and put the kids first, I think it's imperative that the school and the state release those funds to parents to be used in the manner that they feel is most appropriate in educating their kids.
Thank you, Jess, for presenting tonight. If you'd like to send additional information, the link is on the district webpage. So one last call from the participants, the attendees. If you'd like to speak to the truth and to the levy presentation, please raise your hand and you'll be brought over. I don't see any other hands being raised. So, oh, I'm sorry, there was one more that just went up. I'm sorry, I don't have a name attached. It's a number on the screen. So when you're ready, please get started. You'll have 3 minutes to speak to the presentation. We can't see you, so I don't know if you're trying to speak and you're on mute. Oh, there we go.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm trying to get my video to work here. How are you?
Good, thank you. So this is Truth and Taxation. So if you'd like to speak.
Yep, I guess my question is, when will you be taking questions through the meeting format and not by email? Are you guys going to have a meeting where the public can actually participate and get some questions answered? Or is it all going to be electronic and through email?
Is that your comments for this evening?
Well, that's my question.
Okay, this isn't
I think
a
that's
back
a fair
and forth
question.
exchange, right? It's not a back and forth exchange. So thank you for coming tonight. If you've got more, you've got a minute and a half left or so.
Okay, well, I guess my comment would be, the perception to the public from the board is we don't want to answer any questions. We're comfortable doing it electronically by email, but I think that the board should listen. That obviously people want to have a discussion. It's hard to move forward without having some kind of back and forth. And yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of questions on not only getting the kids back in school, but curriculum and choices that are being made right now with curriculum. Maybe choosing not to have math and English and science daily is a concern for a lot of parents. And really, it's frustrating to feel that everything has to be done through an email question. That format, I think, is probably not super productive moving forward. I guess that would be my comment.
Thank you. Okay, so that is the end of the presentation, the Truth and Taxation presentation. Next steps. We need a motion to certify the levy. Is that right, Jeff?
Yeah.
Moved.
Can
Thank you, Julie. We have a motion to approve.
and we need to approve it at, I don't have to bring up that, I don't need to bring up the presentation, but we need to approve it at that dollar amount. So when we did the proposed levy, it's okay to do maximum. Now we want to certify at the total dollar amount.
Okay.
Let me bring that up. So we have that.
So Jeff will provide that number and Julie can update her motion.
So yeah, with the final, we need to do it with that total dollar amount. So we're asking to approve the levy at $15,152,630.82.
Okay, that's my motion.
Thank you, Julie.
Second it.
Second from Judy. So we have a motion on the floor to approve the pay 21 levy in the amount of $15,152,630.82. Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Before you do, I think you said that incorrectly. You may have misspoken. Do you want to just say it one more time?
$15,152,630.82.
Okay.
Is that what I said? I'm sorry. Just to be sure though, yes, the number on the screen in the video. All right.
Kevin Donovan,
Aye.
Julie McGraw, aye. Judy Schwartz,
Aye.
Stacy Stout,
Aye.
and Lucy Payne.
The chair's aye. Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So next for action items, we have the approval of the. I'm sorry. I'm not sure who that was. Okay. Next on the agenda, we have the approval of the resolution filling the school board vacancy by appointment. So on November 19th, we interviewed the 5 finalists for the vacant seat. The board unanimously agreed to bring Tony Vasuni forward to fill this seat. Tonight, we will vote on the official resolution that's in the board packet, and Tony's appointment will begin on December 21st, with his first meeting being on January 7th. The resolution is in the board packet. So I'm looking for a motion to approve the resolution for Tony Vasuni to fill the vacant seat.
So moved.
Thank you, Kevin. I
Second.
will second from Judy. Any discussion? I want to thank board members for the extra meetings in order to get that work done in a timely fashion. Roll call vote, Julie.
Kevin Donovan,
Aye.
Julie McGraw, aye. Judy Schwartz,
Aye.
Stacy Stout,
Aye.
Lucy Payne.
Aye, motion carries. Next on the agenda, we have discussion and information items, starting with the board calendar. The board calendar's in the packet. I want to highlight 2 events coming up in January. One is the AMSD legislative preview on January 8th at 8 a.m., and that'll be on Zoom. And the other is the MSBA Leadership Conference, which will be held January 14th, 21st, and 28th in the mornings, ending with a lunch and learn session at 1 o'clock. You do not need to attend all those days. So if you have conflicts, you can only attend one or part of those days. That would be great. There'll be more information coming from MSBA on what those days look like. Are there other items on the calendar for the rest of December or January board members would like to call out? All right. Next on the agenda, we have the revised budget. Jeff is back.
Yes, I am.
We missed you.
Did I hit screen share there? Maybe not.
Not yet.
All right, I'll get there. There we go. Okay, we're going to ask the, I guess we're doing a presentation and not going to ask you to approve this. We'll do that at a subsequent meeting, but just give you an overview of how things are looking for the general fund and some revisions that we will ask you to act on probably in January. So just kind of the overview of the budget process. It actually, so you approved the levy tonight for pay 21. That really gets us into the development of the 21-22 budget. So in any given year, kind of starts with that property tax levy approval. And then prior to the start of a fiscal year, prior to July 1, the board is required to approve a preliminary budget. And then as we work our way through the budget cycle, I guess you could say, we ask the board typically this time of year to approve a revised budget. And it's the revised budget has updated information. If you think about it, we're developing a budget in the spring, probably in March, April kind of time frame, and we might know the number of FTEs that we're going to have in the district, but we might not know specifically who those people are. We may have some retirements. We can have contract settlements, so some of those numbers can change from that preliminary development, and that's what we're going to take a look at tonight. So we're going to do this just with the overview will be with the general fund. So we'll show the audited financial amounts and then the preliminary budget, and then provide information on what we're looking at for revisions. So if we look at actual data or the actual, I put the 1920 actual results there. This is again general fund. So this is what we see if we look under the hood a little bit of that audit report and look at total revenues, where the different categories for those revenues, and then our uses of revenue. And the big item there is salaries and wages and benefits, accounting for usually around 80% of total budget. So when we revise budget, typically it'll be in that area where again, we've had contract settlements or we've updated our staffing in the fall based on the actual staff who are in place, and we've accounted for retirements, terminations, etc. So what we're seeing there is we brought a preliminary budget to the board back in, you approved this back in June, looking at a surplus of 280,000. And then with some of the revisions, some of the things we're seeing that we need to report to the board on as far as changes to revenue and expenditures, we're looking at a surplus for this current year of 310,245. How that looks and breaks down then on a fund balance scenario. So looking at the actual, this is from the audit report, the 1920 actual. We have our non-spendable, restricted fund balances, assigned fund balance, and then I think the one you're most interested in, that unassigned fund balance at 3.4 million, representing 8.5% of total expenditures. With the revision, we, and I can't see that little slide, so I'll look at my page here. We'll go to that unassigned fund balance, will go to 3.7. Unassigned as a percent of expense will be at 8.7. And so we're about $280,000 above that fund balance target when we're sitting at 8.7. So so with the surplus that we're looking at for as part of the revised budget in the general fund, all of that will find its way to the unassigned fund balance, and again increasing that from the 8.5 to 8.7. Then our kind of looking at the key areas where we are making changes, and it's sometimes good, sometimes bad. General education aid, we reduced that by 308,000, and that's, as we've talked about this in the past, that's a reflection of our revised enrollment projections, dropping the enrollment from preliminary by about 40, I want to say about 41 students. The impact there on the general education aid is to decrease that aid by 308,000. Special education categorical, this is a formula that make you lose your, I guess I've already lost some of my hair, but it's a complicated formula. We don't really know. I think I probably have said this before. So in the audit, we have a total from last year's audit. We have an amount that that we expect to receive, that we booked as total revenue. Some of it will be received yet this year, but counted for as last year's funds and part of a state aid receivable. We really won't know what that final FY20 revenue is until probably April or May of 21. So you're always working with a lot of estimates. I know I call it guesswork. We can do some pretty good estimating and looking at some historical costs and arrive at a number. But and then typically the legislature will set a dollar amount for special education, and if the funding formula from all the districts in the state require, once it's all the calculations are done, if there's more dollars that should have been paid out, they'll prorate that state aid. So I build in a proration factor. I actually had it at 90. I think it's probably safe to say to move that to 0.95. So that's what this recognition of additional revenue is doing. So it's being a little less conservative on special education aid. So we're going to anticipate almost $334,000 more special education aid this year. And then there's also been legislative activity that's phased out. There was a cap on the amount of growth in special education formula that was in place, and those caps are gone. And I would say the removal of those caps have really helped this district. So we probably, the special education revenue, we're probably receiving over $1 million more in categorical special ed than we were 2 years ago as a result of that change. I talked a little bit earlier about the federal program funding. So we have, we're going to recognize, I'd say we're recognizing or estimating, these are actual dollars. We've already received all but about 200,000 of that total, but it's 996,000, 241,000 from the county, or a subrecipient from the county. It's still federal dollars, but 241 of that 996 comes from the county. So those dollars have been helpful with all the additional expenses we've incurred this year, and we'll look at that when we get to the revised expenditures on the next slide. And then miscellaneous revenue, I think we did this last spring, where we talked about, we know we just don't have the gate receipts, the anticipated revenue from student participation, et cetera. So we moved those dollars down by various revenue categories, down by 181, almost 182,000. So those are overall positive impact on the revenue side. A couple places where we are decreasing. And then, so the key changes to the general fund expenditures, staffing, wages, and benefits. We're going to reduce from the preliminary budget 161,000. This simply an update to, like I mentioned, we're developing a budget in March, April with a certain amount of FTE, but now the revised budget takes a look at, okay, we're at that same level of FTE, but we probably have different people making up that total FTE. So there could have been retirements, people have left, there's contract settlements that we didn't have the actual amount back in the spring. So we adjust that. I think we're pretty accurate now with what's there for salaries and benefits in the current budget. We reduced that by 161,000. The purchase services and supplies is where you're seeing the COVID related expenditures. So under the purchase services, it's things like we had additional transportation costs. We have contracted building cleaners. We've hired more certified substitutes. All in all, we're looking at a budget increase there of 595,000. And then on the supply side, 686,000. And a lot of this is a lot of expenditures there are the technology supports, PPE kinds of expenditures. And so that's where the help from those federal funds are finding their way here to help us with these increased expenditures. And then other expense transfers. So we started the year, we had our famous Fund 25 and Fund 50, our short codes. And I just kind of left them the way they were when we developed the preliminary budget. But now they've moved back into appropriate UFARS codes. So some of that actually works its way back into that purchase services supply area as well. So we would have everything in those two funds under another expense for the most part. And there are things in those funds like supplies, purchase services, transportation. So they've been reallocated to get that in line with what we're supposed to do with UFAR's compliance reporting. So that's kind of big picture on expenditures. We looked at the key components of the revenue and what the impacts are. So again, we end up, we're projecting a surplus, 310,000 that will find its way to the unassigned fund balance. So my key takeaways here, we reduced general education aid because of the enrollment decline. The federal COVID relief aid provided an additional 996,000. We kind of showed you where those dollars have been earmarked for. The projected unassigned fund balance exceeds board target, so it should be at about 8.7. I think I said about $280,000 above the 8%, so above the target. And then we will, to keep our auditors happy next year, we'll eventually take action, probably in January, where the board will adopt these budget revisions. So, questions?
Kevin, go ahead.
Let's see, where do I start? Question in regards to the federal funding and whether MASBO or any of the other organizations you work with, Jeff, have had any, been looking into tea leaves and trying to figure out if there might be more federal money coming. So that'd be one question, if you're getting any sense of that. The second question I would have has to do with assumption of state funding upcoming with, again, budget forecast for the state. We've seen quite a wild swing in that, and what you're using or what you're thinking as the assumption on state increase.
Yeah, okay, good questions. On the federal side, I've been listening to the federal stimulus, those talks, and obviously they haven't come to agreement, but they are talking about some of those dollars will be earmarked for. I've heard them say schools and counties and cities. So there may be, so I haven't heard of any specific funding that will be available. But here's the other thing with that. We have another, it's about 118,000. I won't use the finance code. I just put them in the finance code buckets. That's how I have to think. So finance 153. So there's about $118,000 in that category. That doesn't have, these other federal funds have had, they've had real specific timelines to them. Like if we didn't spend the dollars by December 31, we were going to lose them. So we made sure that didn't happen. And like, we've already got all our expenses in and we've received all but we should be getting our final 200,000 from the state, because we reported everything. So there's another call it more additional COVID relief funds under another finance code. It's about $118,000. Does not have the again, the timelines attached that we had with the other funds. So that's an additional, not recognized here yet, could be used. I think you can use those funds into well, I think it goes to September of 22. So we kind of are putting those, if we don't need them, so that could be additional dollars that we have for the following year. And then as far as, I guess looking at the state budget forecast, I believe in January, we're going to bring to you budget assumptions for the next year and start looking at, as we've finalized the levy, we'll start the development of the next year budget. I don't think I'll assume any increase in state aid or special education aid. Hopefully we can utilize that $118,000 of federal funds, but But as you mentioned, Kevin, big swing in that forecast from, boy, I think $4 billion deficit, even at the end of this biennium, to a small surplus, and just what, over $1 billion in the next, for the next year. So big swing in state forecast, but I think we're going to be conservative and kind of plan on no increase in funding, and hopefully hang on to some of those federal funds. And maybe there's more federal dollars available.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions on the budget? All right. Thank you so much, Jeff, for being here tonight and all your presentations.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay, so next we have overview of the school board members' responsibilities. What we have planned to do tonight, we're going to make a slight change in looking at the time. I think we can handle this in a more efficient way. Is we are getting ready for our organizational meeting, which will happen in January. And so the first meeting in January, when we have seated 2 new board members, we'll need to elect our officers for the year and do appointments to committees and things. And so there is a form in the board book that walks through that and who is serving in the current roles. So I asked board members to review that, and if any board members want to speak to any of the items in terms of what the work is like, or and things like that, the board chair for next year would be making the committee appointments in order to make sure that we have good representation across committees and different organizations that we attend. Also, we have having 2 new board members. Kevin Donovan has volunteered and stepped up to be a mentor to Tony Basuni. So Kevin, if you could reach out to Tony and talk through these areas. And so Tony would be able to fill out a request for the board chair about what they would like to do next year. And then Julie McGraw has volunteered to step up to be a mentor to Kelly Reagan. And so if you could do the same thing, Julie, is reach out to Kelly and have a conversation. Stacy, Kevin, Julie, and I have done this before. Judy will be in retirement. And so if you would send to me the committees and positions you're interested in fulfilling next year, the board chair at the meeting will be able to make those appointments for the next calendar year. Questions or concerns about that? The one piece that will need to stay stable is Kevin will continue with 916 because that's a multiple year appointment. And this is the ending of it. You're in your 2nd year, is that right, Kevin?
2nd year, yes. And we're right in the, and it'll be in my report here in a little bit, but we're right in the throes of a superintendent search, and I'm on that team to do that. So.
Right. Okay. Any other questions or comments on thinking about those appointments for next year, for 2021? Stacy, go ahead.
So if there are positions that no one shows interest in, will we just decide those in January?
The board chair is responsible for the appointment to those positions. And so, yeah, if you could send me the list of things you're interested in, I can start looking at that. I don't know. I mean, it's difficult because I'd hate to wait till February to do those appointments. I'm not sure if anyone else is interested in being chair next year, and maybe that would help this as well. I would like to continue. I think it's important to have some consistency right now for Barb and our community because of COVID and the conditions we're working under. So I'd be willing to stay on as chair, but I'm not sure if there's anyone else interested in that because it will need to be a board election with Kelly and Tony coming onto the board. So go ahead, Stacy.
So my only concern is maybe I guess we should also say if there's positions we are pretty sure we wouldn't be able to do. For instance, I think AMSD always meets at a time where I have a work meeting. So I was thinking about how we would be able to know that unless we're communicating that in writing as well.
Right, so that's a really good point. Most the board committees, as you know, meet prior to board meetings, but then there are things like AMSD that have specific times. And so if you absolutely can't do those, when making the appointments, if it won't work, we'll have to make another appointment. And we've done that before too. We've switched mid-year. Go ahead, Barb.
So my recommendation would be for members to send you for now interest in committees and communicate what Stacy's talking about as well in terms of that you can't do. Potentially ranking those committees that you're most interested in and those that you could potentially still do, so that you communicate all of that. And then there's the potential that because for the past couple of years since I've been here, that all just kind of has been pretty quick and easy, and it's worked out pretty well. So I have a theory that might be the case once again in terms of committee appointments. And so, and then potentially you could have that conversation in January if there are any of those committees that you're having a difficult time filling. That would my 2 cents on that. So it'd just be probably similar to what you've done in the past, only you'll be doing it in January.
Right. Kevin, go ahead.
I do think you brought up a good point about Tony and Kelly coming on. It will be their first meeting. And again, the fire hydrant analogy will be very apropos at this meeting because it, it's nice to ease into this, but there's no easing into this one, I'm afraid. And so I think it's really incumbent upon Julie and I to do some nice conversations with our new board members so they understand what they're getting into or not getting into and all that kind of, we'll Julie and I will try to get them up to speed on this particular piece.
So keeping all those pieces in mind, if you could let me know by December 18th by email what your preferences are. Julie and Kevin, if you don't have an opportunity to meet with your mentees prior to that, I can push that out some. And I'll do the best to honor everyone's wishes, but keep in mind that we do want some continuity on the committees as well, that it's important that from year to year, there's some of that continuity. And it would be great on our internal committees that we didn't have a committee with 2 new board members that had a huge learning curve there. And so that will cause some reorganization in our committees because I think I'm the only one left on policy committee. The other 2 people on policy committee will no longer be on the board. And so take a look at all the committees and keep that in mind and then let me know what you're thinking. Go ahead.
I just have one question. The personnel committee meeting, are we going to keep that the nimble, let's just have the first 3 people come that say they're available because we're looking for a quick turnaround on those meetings?
I believe so. That's a change we made during the year last year, I believe, Barb, was it? Or was it further back now? We haven't changed the form. But because the personnel committee, as Julie states, often needs that quick turnaround, we've reached out to the full board and tried to put people together for that.
I'm fine either way. It's just always on the list. So I want to know if I should explain that or if it's a.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember too. I think we started with what the people who were on the personnel committee, and then if somebody couldn't make it, then we asked. I think that's how we did it because I recall.
I think last year we didn't have anyone on there. That's what my recollection was. I don't know.
I don't think the committee needed to have any meetings last year.
No.
Right. So.
Okay.
I'm not sure if we answered that directly.
No, we didn't.
Yeah. Okay. That's what I thought. I was like, I don't think we answered that. So why don't you include that, and then Barbara and I will have a further discussion, and we'll bring that back in January about how we'll handle that in the future. We'll make that decision in January. But go ahead and include it for now while we think about it.
Okay.
Already making a note there. Anything else about those appointments? So next we have a learning model update, or safe learning plan update, I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry. I think we're all set now, right? Everyone can see the screen and hear me? I say yes. Okay, terrific. So I will be going through a few things tonight. This will be a little bit different than some of our most recent our most recent presentations, because I don't have a learning model change to be recommending this evening or to be talking about considering in the near future. But, and I'll also use this as my superintendent's report as well, if that's okay, given the time. So I do have the COVID-19 current data. I'm going to talk about it. I'll show you our district dashboard. We're at a point in the year where we need to offer families the opportunity to change learning models if they would like. That we also have a distance learning 2.0 guide that I'll just highlight briefly. Talk some about our supports during distance learning. We did talk to you about this on the 12th, I believe it was. And Tony in particular, Tony Pierce, highlighted some of those things that we could do. And I'm going to give you an update on that. And also update Tier 1 childcare, which Kate mentioned to you earlier. So you know we track our COVID-19 data over time. This is our Washington County data. You might recall that for a while there, Washington County was pulling out the numbers related to the outbreak at the correctional facilities. That is no longer a factor. As you could see, that gap was closing over time, and now they have gone back to just reporting the one number, which represents our community data. Take note, we did decrease, which is nice. We had been steadily climbing and quickly climbing at times, but now we have decreased. And as a reminder, these numbers are 2 weeks lagging, and they are the numbers that are vetted by the Minnesota Department of Health and the CDC. You can look at Washington County at their daily statistics to see current data. That data won't be exactly the same as the MDH data because that's more real-time data that has not been vetted. So just know that those numbers will not match up exactly. So again, just as a reminder, so this is where we are. Initially, I'll just say that this is what we were given, the learning models recommendations. This is what we were given at the beginning of the year. I know there's been a lot of conversation about this, about this being the beginning, the starting point, and what does it mean for us now that we know more about COVID-19. And so all I can tell you at this point is we are expecting more guidance from the state. And I mention this each time we're together, that I appreciate the board members advocating for this, because I know you've been active in doing that, and as well as our superintendents looking for better and more updated guidance from the state. And we expect that that will be coming, but we do not have that this evening to share with you. Just another image of, or a representation of the numbers that we've seen. I know that people have talked about this as being one data point, and that is the case. We do use this as one data point. We have other factors as well, including our staffing and our ability to staff our schools. I will say to you though, that at this time with the numbers as high as they are, we did get to that point right before Thanksgiving where we were concerned about our staffing situation, and we were fortunate to be moving into distance learning at that time. We have our own internal ways of kind of saying, how can we, when staff are out, how many different ways can we fill those holes internally? And we were in a situation when we got to this point where we were as high as you're seeing here in that 148. That community number does impact what our operations in our schools. So I would want you to know that as well. So the dashboard. So a couple things I want to just remind you is that the Minnesota Department of Health also has a dashboard, and they include schools that have 5 or more confirmed cases in students and staff who were in the building while infectious during a 2-week reporting period. So as you know, the high school has not been in the building fully. We've had some students in, but not fully in the building for a little while now. On October 30th, we were added to the MDH website, but now the high school has been removed, but the middle school is on the MDH website for 5 or more cases. And this is our dashboard from the last week. You can see the middle school had quite a few cases, positive cases right before, right around that Thanksgiving time when we had that break. So, but going forward, I would want you to know that we're going to change for the time being, we're going to change our dashboard format. Our students, unless we have a situation where we have 5 or more cases again, or we have an outbreak in our building, right now, the numbers that are being reported are coming from families who are calling in and letting us know what's going on. And we're very appreciative of that, because we have asked them to continue reporting so we can have that idea of what the COVID-19 spread is, have a better idea of that within our learning community, and as we prepare to return to hybrid learning when we can. So, so we will continue to report that, because we know that's something that our community is interested in as a number, but we're reporting it as a district number at this time, because it isn't by building, because our students aren't in the building. However, we are also not reporting student quarantine numbers at this time, because again, we don't know exactly how many families are reporting that, and because that quarantine number isn't impacting our current operations. However, our staff quarantine does impact operations, because right now our staff is reporting to the schools. They're reporting to work with our small groups of students that are coming in, and I'll talk to you a little bit about that. So we'll continue to report that as well. Do you have questions on that? I know that's a little bit of a change for the time being, but this would be our distance learning dashboard format for now. And I can't see everyone, so I'm just going to keep going unless someone stops me. Okay. Another change right now is, this is our time. We had told families that when they made a choice of either distance learning or in-person learning, that we asked them to make that choice for a semester. And that was important to us because of our needs for staffing and trying to figure out our staffing numbers and assignments. So it's time again to ask if families would like to change. So those families who chose distance learning during semester 1 and would like to switch to hybrid or in-person for semester 2 have that opportunity to do so, and vice versa. I'd want you to know, again, our intent is to bring our students back into the building as soon as it is safe to do so. And so this, what we're asking here, and we sent out, were the family choice part of this. And so families who would like to choose distance learning or choose hybrid when it is safe to do so. That's what we've asked. We've asked them to report by December 18th, so it gives us time to staff. We've seen a little bit of a change, not a whole lot of change between models. We've seen some going in both directions, but not a lot. I wanted to just highlight that we do have our new Distance Learning 2.0 guide, and it's all up on the website. There's schedules and information there for all of our buildings, and that can be accessed from our main page. And so that is updated with the new information for our current situation. So in-person activity during Distance Learning 2.0, we do have staff in the building, and they're working in our schools and in our classrooms. We do have in-person student groups. We do have the Mahtomedi area childcare MAC and Tier 1 childcare, and we also have early childhood is continuing. So during this time, we do have additional health screenings and precautions that we put in place, including staff screenings and student screenings. When we have all our students in for hybrid learning, we are not able to do a temperature check right at the door. It's just not feasible, but we are doing that currently with our situation that we're in right now with bringing in students for the small groups. So we do have academic and social emotional supports during Distance Learning 2.0. And for, sorry, I have to move you around here a little bit. And so for our elementaries, We do have student groups, special education students, students who need additional academic or SEL support, and high needs special education students coming in to our buildings right now. And these are our numbers that we have this week. We had for December 7th, we had 33 at Wildwood and 10 at OH. And then we're also offering virtual support. So I actually saw some of this in action today. I saw some small group interventions that were going on virtually with teachers and students. And at Wildwood, we had 90 students participating this week, and then at OH we had 60 students. And this will continue. I know with OH, they were kind of layering in their supports, and so next week there'll be another layer of students that'll be participating, and those numbers will go up. But middle school and high school also have in-person supports. The high school has been doing this a little bit longer than our other buildings. But once again, what we've been doing is bringing in students who need that individual support, and they may need it because they need support academically, social, emotional support as well. Sorry, or it could be, we called it the kind of an environmental situation where students just could not focus when they were at home and were really needing that additional support and direction. And so that has been happening. I got to see that in action as well. And our counselors are facilitating some of those groups of our students in small groups, and having them in one place so that they can stay focused, but then also having them be able to access teachers during some specific targeted instruction time that we've built into the schedule. So we did change the schedule in order to allow those opportunities. And so at the middle school, we have 45 students who are in that in-person. At the high school, we have 83. Again, they've been doing it a little bit, doing it a little bit longer. And then we also have the virtual small group work that's been happening as well. And so you can see that student participation. So we are continuing to really focus and target students who really need that additional support during distance learning. And it's been going well as we get this started. Okay, so our tier 1 update, Kate started talking about this a little bit here, but we do have free care provided to during distance learning to children that are children of essential care workers. And so I will say one of the things that's been really impressive is having all of our paraprofessionals trained and had the technology training this time around. And so they are able to really help students with that focused instruction. So when they're in for that tier 1 support, students are in classes. So when I went in to see the classes in action, I heard, everyone had their headphones on and students were interacting with the students on the screen. I heard them all saying goodbye at the end of a class. They were asking questions. I saw kids raising their hands. So that's what it looks like. Tier 1 actually looks like it's distance learning is what they're doing during that time. And then they also are able to receive academic support from staff as well as those students that we have in person. So we do have approximately 110 students per day receiving that tier 1 care. So looking at the time, I'm going to encourage you to read some of these in the future. But I want to say that what's been wonderful has been just the support that we have heard from our, or the collaboration, I'll just say, the collaboration between our teachers and our tier 1 support team that just really working together to really support our elementary students in this distance learning environment. So they've just really worked together to make it very organized and productive during those. I went in at one point on the first day, I was with the kindergartners, and we had the kindergarten teachers were coming in and getting us started and teaching us what to do. And so, but the students, I will also say, could show me where to go on Seesaw to be able to get started. So it's been a great collaboration with the teachers and our Tier 1 support staff. So again, we do not have a date for returning to hybrid learning at this time. We continue to work with our regional support team to determine that when that will happen. Certainly on January 7th, at the next school board meeting, we'll have a learning model update. But if we do receive information before then, and I would anticipate that we would, then we'll be able to communicate that to our school community as well, as soon as we get that more information. So I know certainly we'll be reporting on January 7th because we always have the standing report. So I wanted to make sure everyone knew that, but we will be communicating anything new before then as well. And I think at this time, that's the end of my learning model update. Is there anything, any questions that you have at this point? I'll stop sharing so I can see you. I'm sorry, let me just. Oh,
Stacy and then Kevin.
there we go.
I know we're short on time, so I'll try to be quick. Thank you for that. Quick question. The students who have been allowed to come in either at the library or at the DEC for that, you know, when we were in hybrid, they could do that on their distance learning days to come in because maybe they didn't have a good bus at home. Is that still available during all?
I don't know if Kate's, I don't know. Oh, I see. It looks like Patrick might be coming in. We do still have that here. We have a few stations here. Patrick, you know, is that why you're here? Are you here to help?
And do students sign up for it? Then quick.
Yep. Oh.
Yeah, so the public library is not allowing us in right now, but the district, I believe we still are. We have to check with Kate on that, but we did add to our website that an update that let them know that right now Wildwood Library was not allowing it.
But they can still sign up.
We do have a few, you know, our spots, I think we have 3, so it's not,
okay.
But we are able to spread them apart well enough that we can have those 3. And there is a sign up for it, yes.
Okay.
Kevin, go ahead.
Barb, thank you for the report. Appreciate the update, as well as I'm sure our viewers. I heard at 9:16 yesterday when we had our Connie Hayes gave her superintendent report that there is a working group of superintendents that are interfacing with the governor's office and the Department of Ed to kind of talk about where we're at and where we really want to go, where we hope to go, so that the state really understands, you know, where we are. And I think I'd just like to see what your thoughts were on that, and just also kind of reassure the people that are watching tonight and others in our community that we certainly aren't resting on our laurels. We don't like this at all and want this to get back. But along those lines, I think one of the things that was mentioned was we are none of us experts in public health, and yet the state has asked us to become that to a certain extent, you know, with the guidance of the Washington and the regional support. But still, we're having to make these ultimate decisions. Any thoughts on that, Barb?
Yeah, a couple things. So yes, so we continue to work with the state on updating the guidance. So that is the case. We think the guidance can be clearer and more consistent for all districts, so that that our communities understand and are hearing the same thing regardless of regardless of their community. So that is one thing that we have asked. It is the case, I wouldn't suggest that we've been asked to be public health experts, because we do have that support from the regional support team. I think the difficulty is that that the guidance has not always been, I think by county, we may have heard things a little bit differently, and we talked about that before, that when you and I talked with Dr. Mueller, they've been getting better and clearer. However, I also think a lot of the conversations we had were when we were in hybrid going to distance learning, but we don't have guidance, the distance learning back to hybrid. And that's the part that we're asking to be really clear about, because it seems to me that given that we do know more than we did during the summer, that can be clearer to us. So that's what we've requested. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Barb? Stacy?
Just one other quick question. You talked about the students who are going for in-person. Are they identified by teachers or counselors, or can a parent call in and say, my kid has a 504, we haven't heard anything? What's the process?
Yeah, so it is the case that our teachers and counselors have been identifying students. And I would also encourage parents who feel like their student needs support to also contact their counselors. It's both. And I do know that it's been both. I do know of a couple of parents who have reached out and said, things are really hard. And I need that extra support, and they've come in that way. So it's both. Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I see Kate joined us. Kate, did you join to answer Stacy's earlier question? And I think Tony joined us to add something as well, maybe. But Kate, go ahead.
Yes, so Stacy, the like Patrick said, the space is available here, but we have not had any recent requests to come to the district center.
Thank you, Kate, for jumping on. And then Barb, did you want Tony to speak to something? He's joined.
Only if Tony feels like there's anything else that needs to be represented, but I think he just came in as backup if needed, so.
Okay.
That's correct. I was brought in, but I think it was answered. I think we're good.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you, Barb, for your ongoing work on this. I know it's a very difficult time, and there's a lot of misinformation that makes it even more difficult for everyone, for parents, for teachers, for staff, and for us as well. So thank you for your ongoing consistent communication with us and keeping us updated. Next on the agenda, we have board updates, committee reports. So Kevin, you had AMSD this month, I believe?
Yep. Let's see here. I'm going to, again, try to make this as brief as I can. You mentioned the legislative session preview, and I'm assuming that Laura will kind of organize that so that people can get the Zoom code and go to this session.
You bet.
Okay, but it's good. It's highly, the information is out on the AMSD website. I highly recommend it. The governor is invited, and Commissioner Mary Kathleen Ricker looks like she may be confirmed, as well as Melissa Hortman. We've got Paul Gazalka, Susan Kent, and Ron Kashera. So we've got quite an all-star cast. We also have some superintendents coming. This, I would really highly recommend that we carve out time on your calendars to attend this. There are a number of priorities that they're encouraging, and again, a 2% to the formula. We talked about that earlier, about whether that's going to be possible based on our budget projections. But we have to have a number that we ask for. And as everybody knows, our rate of payment from the state for state aid has not kept up with the consumer price index for about 18 years. Closing the opportunity gaps, obviously a priority for all of the education groups and schools. And so there is work there. Again, this is all out on the website. Enhance taxpayer equity. This is something that always we talk about how we can make this a little bit more fair. Also then the reducing the mandates and encouraging innovations, and the first bullet point speaks very much to what we, the Mahtomedi School Board, was able to have passed through the delegate assembly process with MSBA. So this kind of amplifies this message, and thank you, Lucy, for kind of getting us onto this one. And we have, I think, some good traction on this. But again, looking at competency-based educational model versus in lieu of seat time requirements. So there's some really good stuff here. I would urge you to take a peek, and certainly plan on coming in January. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Julie, do you have a MAFE update?
There is not a December meeting, but I am sure the fall fund drive is still going on. That's all that's going on.
Thank you. And for MSBA, Kevin gave a preview to that. We had the delegate assembly on December 2nd. Julie, Kevin, and I attended that. 11 resolutions were discussed and voted on. One resolution was withdrawn. There is information on the MSBA website, but yes, the resolution we wrote and put forward was approved by the assembly. And so now it's part of the MSBA platform that'll push forward this year. If you want more information, you can contact any one of us. We have our packet of information. I think it's available electronically too on the website. Kevin, 916.
Okay, two kind of big things with 916, and I'm trying to send out the information I get as I get it, so I'll keep doing that. But the two highlights: superintendent search. Connie Hayes, as I've mentioned before, is looking to to retire after a number of years of service, great service, and so the board has started the process of a new superintendent. The first piece was to determine whether we needed a search firm. We decided that we needed a search firm. Then we put out an RFP to figure out which search firm would best fit our needs. We landed unanimously this small working group. It's the executive committee plus one person, a board member from South Wash. We landed on Ken LaCroix, who has been around and done a lot of this work, and one of the only superintendent search firms that's worked with intermediate searches. And so at our board meeting yesterday, we have agreed, the board unanimously voted to approve Ken LaCroix's contract. And he will be working then with a timetable of, once the new board members are established for 916, which is, again, some weren't reelected on their home board, so they won't be back. The only one that comes to mind is Sarah Stivland of Stillwater. A couple are finishing their term of service, so there'll be some new ones rolling on. So we want to make sure all the board members are seated and ready to go. Then Ken will begin the search process. One of the other compelling things that we really landed on was this idea that the 916, as you know, there is the governance board, the official board of record, which is these school board members from the 14 member districts. But the other unofficial board is obviously the superintendents of the said 14 districts. So his presentation was really engaging the superintendents of member districts in this process, which, for the 5 of us that are on this task to figure out which one of these RFPs we wanted to accept, that was a huge determinant factor. So sorry, Barb, but you're gonna have a little extra there, but I think it's well worthwhile for the investment we make with 916. Having the voice of you and Tony, I think, are really super important. So the last thing I have for 916, this is super exciting. I'm going to wave my arms because it's really super exciting. In the time of COVID-19, obviously we're really challenged, and we've been talking about that all evening. And how do we overcome these challenges, and how do we do things differently to meet these challenges? Because a lot of our educational things are they're there. And so just because of COVID, they don't go away. And so a big part of 916 is working with autistic and developmentally disabled students. And 916 handles some of the students that are very profoundly affected by this. And so we have the level 4 students who require a lot of extra special services. And with the schools closing down and the distance learning, we've got students that really need that routine of coming to school and having the various, various projects that they do in the schools. And, the one that comes to mind is that calming exercise of putting the hands in a sand table. It's just a lot of these things are no longer present for these students. So what the assistant superintendent Valerie Bowe has come up with was an idea of taking the show on the road. So they have actually customized trailer that will be pulled to the homes of students that really need those extra supports. And so there'll be a protocol for how the thing gets moved around. And then it will go from home to home and work with the students. The trailer will have special lighting, intensity lighting, color lighting. Again, lighting is a big deal for some of our students. There are sensorial things as far as fabrics and various surfaces in this trailer. There is sound deadening materials, try to make it less noisy. Again, all with the idea of giving consistency to these students where they really need that. Here's we see a problem and here is a solution to a big problem. And Channel 11 has already jumped on this thing. I think this is going to be one of the, just reading the tea leaves, I think it's going to be a really big deal. It's kind of exciting. It's kind of exciting in this time of COVID and a lot of depressing news and a lot of, to see innovation, because that's what this speaks about. It's innovation, and it's teachers and administration that are passionate about delivering for these students, and they're going to the nth degree to deliver on that. So I was just kind of excited about that yesterday. If you can't tell, I just think it's super cool. And that's my report.
Thank you, Kevin. Are there other committees or groups people have attended they need to report on tonight? Okay, and Barb, you've done your superintendent's report combined with the earlier piece. So the last thing we have on the agenda is a closed session to discuss personnel matters pertinent to Minnesota Statute 13D05, Subpart 3A, Superintendent Mid-Year Review. At the end of the closed session, we will return to open session to adjourn the meeting. There will be no additional business. And so I'm just letting the audience know that there's nothing to come back to see besides us making that motion to adjourn. So before we go to closed session, I would like to remind our community that we are committed as a board and superintendent to returning our students to full-time in-person instructions when it is safe to do so. I want to thank Judy Schwartz again for all her service in the past 32 years to our district, our board, and our students. So if I could get a motion to move to closed session.
So moved.
Oh, moved by Julie. Kevin, I'm going to give you the second if that's okay. Roll call vote to move to closed session, please.
Kevin Donovan.
Aye.
Julie McGraw, aye. Judy Schwartz.
Aye.
Stacy Stout.
Aye.
Lucy Payne.
Aye. So Barb or Alice, how are we doing closed session? Are we being put in a discussion room? How are we going to do this to?
So I think, is it possible then maybe what we should do is just, I could start a new Google Meet for us to have a separate one. Would this just stay open? Is that what happens?
We need to keep this one open for the public. If they want to wait and listen to us adjourn, they can.
Okay.
And so
maybe I'll just start a separate Google Meet and invite you all, and we'll go into that.
For some reason, Barb and Judy seem to be in as panelists or attendees. So we had our closed session. We had a vote to come back to open session. And so now we need a motion to adjourn the meeting. Judy, would you like to make that motion?
I move we adjourn the meeting. Good, perfect.
Exactly. I'll second that motion. So we have a motion, a second to adjourn the meeting. Julie, roll call vote.
Kevin Donovan,
Aye.
Julie McGraw, aye. Judy Schwartz,
Aye.
Stacy Stout,
Aye.
Lucy Payne.
Aye. Motion carries. We're adjourned. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Judy.
Bye, Judy.
Bye.
Sorry we had such a